Hey everyone, so I'm just going to walk you through my new device, Entanglement. It's an instrument and it's a dual polyphonic oscillator. The oscillators get their waveform value from an underlying one-dimensional quantum wave function or Schrödinger equation. So basically, in this display, you'll see an initial quantum state. And if I play a note, it basically runs the quantum wave function simulation that changes the initial state. And whatever the state in this window is at every moment is the waveform that gets played back as a kind of a wavetable oscillator, but a single cycle. So this device is centered around basically manipulating this quantum wave function and running it and manipulating the waveform you get from it. It's got a lot of features, a lot of different ways you could, add energy to this and add environmental factors to this and all sorts of things to change this energy and the way the simulation runs. And then also lots of options for manipulating this waveform to get different sounds. And then it's got all the standard polyphonic stuff like a modulation system. And there's two separate oscillators that have their own independent wave functions and settings. So you can get a lot of cool sound design out of this thing. What stands it apart from other wavetable oscillators is this wave function. It doesn't do like a wavetable where you go between waveforms in a wavetable file. Instead, this is a simulation that runs and the simulation will affect or will transform and evolve the sound in many ways. There's also different types of modes of it and to get all sorts of different sounds. So it does stand itself apart from the many other wavetable synthesizers that are out there. So hopefully you'll find that unique. Anyway, that's the basic concept, and now I'll just go through the whole device and explain how each thing works, hopefully as quickly as I can. So I already described the central concept, and here on the far left, these are just tabs to select the settings for either the first oscillator voice, the second oscillator voice, or the modulation system. And these little boxes here turn those on and off. You can also just deactivate the modulation if you want to. Okay, so I'll probably not go into this voice much and just focus on the first one because they're identical. So let's start talking about the settings of the oscillator and wave function simulation. So let's start at the top with this wave value mode setting. All right, I'll have to describe a little bit more about what's happening. I'm going to maybe click some things around. Don't worry about them. I'll get to them later. So I'm going to start in this middle mode. And I'm just going to click here to add a quantum particle or an energy or a wave packet. I might use those words interchangeably. So these modes are just ways to visualize the values. The values underlying are all the same, but this visualizes them differently and thus will give you a different sound. For instance, all right, this middle mode is the real values mode. So not to get too into the math, because I want to focus on the synth, but this is a one-dimensional quantum wave function, and you have two planes of values. You have the real values and the imaginary values. We don't ever really see the imaginary values in this device because I don't visualize them, but they affect each other in the simulation. Now, in this center mode, it's the real values. So these are what the raw real values look like and sound like when they're sonified. And this right now sounds very thin. And you can use this center mode for very thin sounds, although you can do stuff to make it not thin as well. And yeah, so, and this mode here in the center usually has a lot more frequency content. You could probably even see here this mode is just a single lump, and this mode has more frequency. And I could even do another thing to show you that. This has a lot of frequency, and here we can see they're just two lumps. So this mode, you can get a lot more frequency. And this is, again, just the real values. So this is kind of how the actual values look like. This value on the far right is the real values as well, same as this, but an absolute value function is applied to them. So these are usually bipolar with 0 in the middle. But if you apply an absolute value function, they go to a polar coordinate from 0 to 1. So they're literally the same values, but the absolute value of them, no negative. Slow that down. Okay, and then this one on the far left, again, this is the real values, absolute value. This is the real values themselves. And this one is a combination of the real and imaginary values to get what's called a probability. And this is what you're probably used to seeing if you ever see a quantum wave function visualized. You usually see the probabilities. And that's just taking the square root of the vector of the real and imaginary values. And so these are, because they're a probability, of the two real and imaginary, they usually become a lot smoother. They can get unsmoothed too, but because of the nature of the math, they usually are smoother. But they have all the same, they're the same simulation values underlying, but they just look differently and thus sound differently. Great. You might be thinking this mode is just way too thin and not usable, but this mode, again, you can do a lot of different stuff with it. Or unless you want that kind of thinner, filtery sound, it's good for that. All right, so those are the value modes. To the right of it is speed. So this controls the speed of the simulation. You can go slow, even freeze it. Let me turn it down slightly for now. So we can freeze it, and we can go fast. And something you should know about speed is that it's not like a pure thing. It actually scales what's called the DT parameter variable in the simulation, and this affects the speed, but not without consequence. Right now, it's pretty not doing much harm, so to speak, but in certain other settings and modes, if you make this higher, it will change the behavior, either giving artifacts or just change how things behave, and I'll kind of make notes of that. But that's not a bad thing in sound design. I mean, you can actually sometimes get desirable results from that. So I'll talk about that as we go. So that's speed. And yeah, all right, this little note icon, when it's on, the speed is additionally scaled by Live's BPM. So if you turn the BPM higher, like I'm doing now, or lower, it will make the speed faster or slower too, so that you can keep it consistent if you want with the transport. And at 120 BPM is the normal 1-to-1, although it doesn't matter to know that much. This arrow makes it run forward and reverse, so if I go slow, you'll see they go that way, but if I go this way, they go in reverse. And that's useful for a lot of stuff. I mean, some things it won't make a difference for, but some things, you know, it'll be cool to go the other way. Or also, you'll see later that you can progress something and save the state. And then if you started with this in reverse, you'd reverse that dynamic, which can be pretty cool. This down here, the HQ. So there's also a frame rate that's separate from the DT speed, the frame at which the simulation runs. If HQ is off, it runs at a much lower frame rate, and the speed is scaled up so that you don't notice it. See, like, and if I turn on, they're the same speed, but you might notice if you go really fast or on certain settings, if HQ is off, it might be more steppy or less smooth. But you will save a lot of CPU turning this off. So if this device is quite heavy for you, try turning HQ off, especially on both of these if you're using two. And then you might drop a lot of CPU. It really makes a big difference. And my advice is, if it doesn't affect the sound you're doing, I would turn it off. There's no point in having it on. But if you notice a difference turning it on or off, you might want it on. Or if you're using like this as a sub sine oscillator, you definitely don't need it on. You know, things that are just slower or still, you usually don't need it. But feel it out. Okay, that's the speed section. All right, now for this editing section. So you'll notice right now it just shows the initial state. So if I play a voice, they start from here and then move, right? And if I edit this when there's no voices, if I add that, now that's there at the initial state, right? However, if I hold a voice and add a bunch of these, and then I let go, it didn't affect the initial state. It stayed the same. Now if I play it, it's the same. So again, if I hold a voice and edit it, that edit I did in the voice didn't affect the initial state. But if I'm in the initial state and add stuff, it does affect it. Okay, so I'm just showing you. And also what's visualized, when I release all voices, we visualize the initial state. And when I play a voice, it visualizes the latest current voice that's active. Okay, so that's how the visual and editing works when you're in all mode. If you switch to init mode, if you switch to init mode, then if I play notes, we only ever visualize the init function. I'm playing notes, we never see the active voice. And likewise, even if I'm playing voices and I edit it, those edits will only edit the initial state and not the active voices. So once again, this edit mode all is a more dynamic mode where you can edit the initial state when there's no voices or active voices when there are voices. Edit and initialize, and edit and visualize. And when edit is an init mode, you only edit and visualize the initial state. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's clear it. Okay. All right, now this part. So this is an auto reinit function. So right now, if I hold a voice, it just goes on forever doing its thing. Let's add a reverse one. Right? But if I have auto reinit on, then active voices will automatically reinitialize to their initial state at the set interval. So right now it's every half bar. Let me make it more dramatic. Every quarter note. More dramatic. Every 16th note. So now they reinitialize to this initial state, active voices, every 16th note. You can also set it in milliseconds. And yeah, and this is useful for lots of stuff. Like you can create cool rhythms like this, or wobbliness. Also, sometimes you'll set up something that like kind of deteriorates or dampens or something, and you might reinit it to the initial state to continue like it consistently. And you can make that really smooth. It's all depends what you do. Like you could match this to an LFO rate and do something that's kind of looping, all sorts of stuff like that. All right, so that's this section. Now let's go down here. This section at the bottom, so you've noticed I click stuff and it adds stuff. So this whole section deals with the cursor. So when you click or drag on here, what happens? That's what this section deals with, and there's different options for that. So this first option is adding quantum particles or wave packets or energy. So if I clear it, right, so these settings set when you click here what kind of particle is added. So there's a few options. The first one is sine, so that's a Gaussian distribution, and this is the only one probably out of the bunch that is most like an actual quantum wave particle is simulated. So this is like the only kind of authentic one, I guess. And so when you click, it adds a particle. Let me turn this off. And the X you click on is the center of that particle, and the Y is the peak of the wave. If you add more, they'll just get bigger, like that. So yeah. Now, this parameter here is the velocity, so it's how quickly it moves. So if I do a higher velocity here, you'll notice this one moves faster, and if I do an even higher velocity here, well, it was so high it went the other direction? I don't know. Let's try it again. Yeah, I guess if they go too high, they even start to reverse because of some math thing. All right, so let's go like this. Whoa, that's awesome. Too high. All right. So yeah, all these three are at different velocities, and you see they move at all different speeds. All right, now, if I turn velocity to negative values, then it's the reverse. So let me clear it so it's a little easier. So I'll do one moving to the right, and if I go negative and add one, it moves to the left. And yeah, hopefully you can notice, like, if a part of a wave is colored yellow, it goes to the right. If a part of the wave's blue, it goes to the left. And yeah, these are per section, so you can mix them up. This little bit's going different directions. So that's velocity. And just so you know, so let's go to real value mode. Velocity is also the frequency of the real value. So if I do a low velocity here, it's only like a lump. If I do a higher velocity, it's a high frequency. So the frequency of the values relates to the velocity of the movements. Let me do one that's going the other way. And it's cool, they mix together, and if you wait long enough, they actually separate apart again. It's pretty cool. I mean, it depends on what you have. Some of them separate quicker than others. Hard to nail down real quick like this. But yeah, and you'll notice here in the absolute mode, they also have the higher frequency. And here in the probability, you don't see it as much because, again, it does a probability. But you can kind of see them when they blend. And you can see the frequencies start to change. If I normalize it. Anyway, don't want to get too lost in this, lot to cover. All right, now moving on. The width is just the width of the particle, so I could do a high width, and I could do a little width. So that's It's just the width of the particle waveform. Let me go back to a default. All right, now this I phase. So I told you there's real and imaginary values. We don't see the imaginary, but imagine they're there. If you shift this, it will shift the phase. So when you add a particle, it's added to both the real and imaginary plane. But if you've shifted this, it will shift the phase of the values added to the imaginary. So you can see them a bit in this mode because this mode combines them. So this is with no shifting. And here's with a bit of shifting. And you can see it looks much different now. And not only does it look different, it will travel differently. So if there's no shift, it travels, let's turn the velocity a little higher. If there's no shift, it travels like this, just straight to the right because of how their phase relationship is. But if I turn this like this, let's see, they separate. Kind of at a clean division around 70 degrees. So you can see if I went to 90, they'll split in half and go each opposite ways. And if we do 180, I think they might just go the other direction. Let's see. Yeah. So maybe you can get an idea of how that works intuitively. If we're at 45, then most will go to the right, a bit to the left. So they kind of splits them in how it rotates. And you won't, sorry, the drifting. You won't be able to see that visualized in this mode because they only show the real values. But you will see it happen once it starts running. So if we do the 90-degree split that I showed you, let's do a lower velocity. It's too low, sorry. Let's do like that. You see that they split now. But in the initial state, you can't see that visualized. Pretty cool. All right. Now, one thing I didn't describe was the different wave shapes. Now, this, like I said, this is the only true one. These other ones are just basic shapes that are experimental. So we got a square. Let's visualize them here. Here's a square wave. And a lot of them just get really noisy. Let's hear. Yeah, you'll have to experiment with them. And if we shift the I phase, it'll be even weirder. You can also smooth these out. I'll show you that more later, but if I added some smoothing. All right, here's the saw. Let's go back to zero phase shift. Yeah, so you see these are a lot more asymmetrical than the sine because of their shape nature. Here's a triangle. That one's got a nice harmonic series. Yeah, and they seem similar now, but if you play around with them, you can get quite different results. This one's just noise, so it just adds noise, which we could also smooth out. That's cool. Whoa, that's a weird one. Okay, and then one of my favorites is this bottom option, which is a chirped oscillator. And this is like, looks like that. And this you can get really cool harmonic series out of. It's cool. And of course, you can adjust the I phase with it to make it even weirder. And the velocity too. Let's try that. Let's do a low velocity. Cool. So yeah, I like the chirped oscillator a lot. All right, let's move on. I'll just do a basic thing now. All right. The next cursor mode is potentials. These are environmental factors. So they're things that you add to this simulation to affect these particle energies. and there's a few different options. So the first one is barrier. I'll put it here. So you just click to add them, click again to remove them. And they have a little letter next to them to tell you which kind of environmental factor they are. So here's barrier. And it does what it says it should. It blocks them as a barrier. Now, if you had the speed higher, like I said, it will change the behavior. So some of them will kind of tunnel through with a higher speed. Or even if it's high enough, they will a lot of it pass through. So yeah, you can see it's adding artifacts at higher speeds. You can also, if you wanted a low speed and to block, you could try instead adding a higher velocity waveform if you want to go faster. But you see it quantum tunnels through a bit in this one. And that's not, the other ones were artifacts, but this one's not. It's just that the frequency allows it to, I think, given the imaginary plane isn't blocked. Anyway, so that's barrier. Oops. Do that. Okay. Let me do a lower velocity again. Okay, let's go back to potentials. The other one is a trap. So this is like a harmonic oscillator that kind of does a spring-like kind of confinement of these. So if I put it here, it's going to kind of rotate around the trap spring-like. And it also affects the shape of this as it moves. And if you want to better understand what it's doing, you can go to the real value, and it's quite cool. It'll increase the frequency as it gets closer and decrease as it goes away. Let me go slower. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Let's do it on this mode. Yeah, and there's a little parameter here for the trap, so you can increase the strength of it. I guess it got so strong it broke it apart. And it also makes a difference exactly where you put it. If I put it here, it just goes around the middle, or right here, or here. So yeah, or I could put 2. Doesn't know what to do. Wow, that's cool. So yeah, you can really play with mixing these and get a lot of cool results. I still have not personally explored that quite to its full depth, which is a lot. All right, let's go to the lattice. This like simulates a crystal lattice. And it'll affect it in various ways. So again, let's slow it down, and you can see what it does in the real plane, which is really increase the oscillation of all of these at different points. Sorry, this drifting, sample dropping. All right, at different points. And that looks like this here. Pretty cool. Now you can control the lattice frequency here, and that will change its behavior. So if it's really low, it won't do much. Let me go to a faster speed. So yeah, it even causes it to oscillate at kind of lower speeds, but in a dirty way. Now this one might be good with some more smoothing, so I'll put up the smoothing. So with no smoothing, and here's with some smoothing. So yeah, looks a little better with smoothing. Depends what you want. So it's a little complicated, this one's behavior. Can really get, wow, I haven't played with it a ton. Can really get cool results. It's nice with the smoothing up. If I turn the smoothing down, it's very noisy, but you might want that too. All depends what you want. So yeah, again, my advice for these things is to go into this mode, and you can kind of see what they do at a low speed. I don't know how to describe it, but that's what it's doing to the waveforms. And again, we can smooth it. Pretty crazy. Whoa. And it depends where you put it. I'll put it here. Wow, interesting. Again, this is at a low frequency too. Let's go to a higher frequency. Higher frequency. A lot of times the higher frequency can make it stay in place too. But, you know, oscillating all crazy there. Well, does a lot of stuff. The lattice, pretty interesting. All right, let's go to the slope. The slope accelerates. It's like a linear slope, so it kind of accelerates the particles. But that accelerates these velocities. And so it has a kind of interesting effect too. Depends where you put it too. Whoa. Yep. Again, let's smooth it out. Cool. Let's put it here. Kind of accelerated the other direction. Let's put it 2. So yeah, if you mix these together, you know, slope and a trap, I don't know, crazy stuff can happen. Oh wait, that's 2 traps, sorry. Slope. That's cool. Turn off the smoothing. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I'm getting a little too slow here. But yeah, you can mix them up again for the millionth time. All right, this one's a double well, so you can use it kind of like a barrier too, but it does a bit more. Oops. So just play around with it to see. Again, it kind of depends where you put it. I guess even which side you put it on. Let's you in here. Whoa, crazy. Kind of reflected it. Yeah, I guess if you put it on this side, it does something completely different. Let's go in slow motion. That's cool. So yeah, if you go slow motion on these, you'll get a whole different kind of feeling in the sound. A whole progression. Let's go lower octave. Where's it gonna go? Just gets faster and faster, and then what? And then does this and kind of pushes it. Interesting. Wow, and kind of injects noise as it pushes it. Interesting. So yeah, you'll have to just play around with these things. Wow, that's cool. Depends where you put them and stuff. Very cool. Okay, sorry, getting lost. And then this one's easy, random. It just injects noise. So just adds noise wherever you are. Let me turn the smoothing off. So yeah, it just makes things noisy. All right, that's all the potentials. They're pretty fun. Definitely give them a shot. But all the values are sensitive, so you know, you gotta dial it in. All right, the next option's draw. This one's pretty easy to explain. You can just draw. Sorry, I'm in normalize mode. You can just draw values. And you can draw on existing values, whatever you want. Yeah, that's it. There's an erase toggle, so you can just erase values. And then, sorry, let me turn that off. And then there's this external draw. So if you want to draw with a controller or automation, it's like an etch-a-sketch kind of draw. So if this button's on, then you can move these to draw. Etch-a-sketch style. So you can map this to a controller and then draw. It's not very interesting with my mouse, but if you had it on a touchpad, this could be pretty cool. And you just toggle this on and off with a button. you know, and you could have it running crazy and just like draw. You can have other settings that dampen it, and then so it'll fall down, like if I dampened it. And then you could draw. Smooth it. I'll get to this more later. And then you could just draw on it, I guess, and do stuff. I don't know what you'd do. Try it out. Okay, so that's drawing. It's pretty easy. And then the last one is this wave. So this one's cool. This one's where you can actually add wave files onto here. So if I went, it's best to go in the real value mode because this will show you what the waveform truly looks like. So there's these different options. Let's just do a sine wave. So if I click, it adds a sine wave. Let me do soft. Let me slow down the simulation. Yeah, so if I froze the simulation and turn these edges down, it's just a pure sine tone, basically. Now, if I went to this mode, it's the probability of them, so it looks a bit different. And this mode's the absolute value, looks like boobs. And yeah, they're the absolute value of the sine wave. So that said, this middle real values mode will show the waveform as it truly looks. So if you want that, you stick to this. But these can sound cool too. Depends what you want. All right, and there's a lot of different options. Like here's a nasty saw wave apparently, and strings apparently. Yeah, and as you can read here, drag and drop. So you can drag and drop your own wave file here and add it. I recommend doing single cycle waveforms here. It's not a wavetable oscillator. If you dropped a wavetable file here, it'll be all of the waveforms downsampled to 512 values. So you can do it, but it won't sound how you want it, maybe. Yeah, it downsamples to 512. So you can drag and drop your own wave files here, any kind you want, but I recommend single cycle waveforms. And then, yeah, and then if I run the simulation speed, it'll actually run these waveforms in the quantum simulation, which is cool. And you can, if you add again, it'll just kind of add on to those values. So if I click this saw line, it kind of adds that. Now it's just getting a lot, you know. So if I started over and did, you know, a sine, and then I added this square, but let me turn the width down for this square. That's what this does, the width. And so here's a smaller width square I added here. So you can actually just add onto it, and then you can add a particle onto it. It just adds on to what's there, and then you can clear it if you want. So yeah, here's the width. Here's an even smaller width square. So you can make them really small or really big. And then this I phase is the exact same thing that was in the particle, imaginary phase rotation. So remember, these values are added to both the real and imaginary plane, and this phase will rotate the phase of them added to the imaginary plane, which may or may not make a difference depending on the thing you're adding. So this is how this one behaves now. I'm not sure if it'll make a difference, but let's try changing this. It made a difference. It might not hear it well, but you can see it. So some of them might be more dramatic than others. And yeah, you could probably see it better in this mode. So, sorry. Sample dropping. All right, so if I did a sine wave here, yeah, if I did a sine wave, here's a no rotation sine wave. And if I did one that had a bigger rotation, we can see it's a bit different. But the sine waves don't move that much anyway because of their math nature. All right, that's all these modes. Let's go back to a simple particle. Let me do opposing particles for the rest of the demonstration. Okay, so that was a lot, but that's probably the biggest section. The rest will be hopefully easier. All right, so except for this section. All right, so this section here deals with saving your edits. So by default, auto save edits is on. This is a button. And that means that every time you make a change, it saves that change to memory. And that means that if you save this in a live set or as a preset, when you reopen your live set or preset, all these changes you make will be recalled exactly as you left off. However, if you turned off autosave edits, it does not save these changes. And if you wanted to save these changes you made, you have to press one of these two buttons. If you press save init, it will just save what's here already. So if I press this now, save init, it gets saved to memory, and now if I recalled my live set, it will load this. But if I added all this stuff now and did not press these buttons and reload my live set, it will reload to what was there before, which is this. If I press revert, it will go to the last saved memory. So if you're in autosave edits, these two buttons don't do anything because it saves every edit you do. But if this is off, then you have to press this manually, and you have the option to also do edits and then press this to revert back to the last saved state. Now this button here, save voice, this will save to memory what the current active voice is at. So if I played this, and let's say I'm like, oh, this is cool here, I want to start from here. Then I press save voice, and now the initial state is that moment. So now it starts from here. Hopefully that makes sense. So if I did this, and I'm like, oh, I actually want to start the voice from right now. I'll press that, and now it saves where we are, and that's where it starts from. So that's what save voice does, and that can be really useful for a lot of stuff. Like, check it out. For example, if I had one particle here, or no, check this out. If I had one particle, let me do that. Sorry. So if I had these opposing particles, and I ran them, and they get all mixed up, right? Let's say I save it there. So it starts here, right? So maybe that's cool. I want to start there. Let me normalize it. But now I could press this reverse, and instead of the harmonic series going down like it is, it'll go in reverse back up. That's cool, huh? So if I did forward, keeps going along. But if I do reverse, so yeah, you can actually use this save voice to design a certain start state that you can't get really well from just drawing them here. You can be like, save, and now it starts here, and now let's go in reverse. Yeah, so you can do lots of cool stuff with that. Clear, which I've been pressing a lot, clears this energy. Okay. Okay. And then this button, copy to 2, if I press this, right now 2 has this sine wave, but if I press this, now 2 has where we are. It just looks different because the settings are different. If I went to the same settings, well, I'll have to look in that. Maybe there's a bug. Or maybe I'm just missing something. Oh, that's weird. I'll have to check that out. It might be because I didn't save a voice or something. I'm not sure. But I'll make sure that works fine for when you get it. Anyway, but that's what it should do in theory. When you press this, it'll copy this over to here. But like I said, it doesn't copy the settings over, so it might not be the exact same. Okay. So, yeah, it might be because I didn't save it. Let's just make sure before I... Okay, yeah, it's because I didn't save the edit. You have to save it first. So yeah, now they look the same. Okay, so here in the middle these are values that can affect the waveform. So most of these don't affect the simulation, but just the resulting waveform. So there's a few different settings, menus. So this first one, amp, deals with the amplitude of the waveform, which is the height of these values. So if I went to clip mode, it clips high values at the top, which we can see now. These values are going high, they're going over the top, they're just getting hard clipped. Okay, this soft clips values going over the top. So these ones approaching the top get softened and softly clipped. Fold folds the values. So if I turn the volumes up, when they hit the top, they fold back like they reflect. And if they hit the bottom, they reflect back up. And they'll keep doing that and get really noisy if you do a lot of this. And if you do a little bit of it, it just adds some harmonics, kind of. Okay. Normalize is really one I use a lot. I use all of them a lot, but normalize is probably one of the most. Normalizes the values. So the highest value goes just to the top. So like in clip, these values went above. If I go to normalize, they get pushed down to here. And likewise, if these values were very low, not reaching the top, if I want to normalize, it will normalize them. So it always keeps them kind of at this even distribution. So sometimes if I did a series over time, the values could get kind of low. Not right now, but in other situations. Normalize will keep them always big and a kind of equal volume. Also, some settings, I'll show you later, make everything explode. But if they're normalized, they'll not explode, and you could get even really cool effects. I'll show you that. Mostly to do with the edge modes. I'll show you. Basically only to do with edge modes, actually. All right, and then the last one is compression. So you could compress the values. So if they were quite low, I could compress these down and get this kind of different shape even, like a fatter shape. It's a very simple compression. And this is the threshold for the compression. Okay, great. All right. Now these two, as you may have been noticing, so pre-gain is the gain before it hits this amp mode. So you can adjust the gain. So it's easy to see in fold maybe where I turn it up, starts gaining. Now post-gain is the gain after the amp mode. So I could do this and then just turn all that down or high. It gets clipped again after this, so don't worry. Okay, that's the pre and post gain. And then smoothing, I've been sneak peeking as we've gone, so that will smooth the value. So if we get something more noisy, like these, or like literal noise, we can smooth. It's all very noisy, we can smooth it out here. Yeah, useful in a lot of situations. Very useful. This one is one you'll use a lot, maybe. Dampen, as I showed you before, it dampens the values over time. So right now, they just keep going. If I turn damping up, they'll get lower and lower. If I turn it up higher. So it can add a kind of natural envelope and many other things. Depends how you want to use this. Like you could do it with the auto reinit. You know, you can do it in a lot of ways. Now, something to note is that the dampening scales with the speed. So if I turn up the speed, the dampening will turn up internally. And that's to keep them kind of consistent with each other. Consistent with each other. All right, so that's dampening. All right, let's move on, and maybe I'll give you the classic two particles hitting each other. Okay, this is warp mode. This is a really good section that you'll probably use a lot. It's got some stuff even from the Ableton wavetable oscillator here, which I kind of took from. So these don't affect the simulation again. And so stretching pushes them to the left or right, depending which way you stretch. Let's go to normalize for this stuff. So, yeah. Warp pushes them in and out the center. They're both pretty fun to use. FM isn't an FM oscillator, but adds FM to these, kind of like the Ableton one. So you can add frequency modulation to the waveform image and get more harmonics. You could also smooth that out afterward if you want. All right, width affects the peak width of the waveforms, so you can make them smaller or wider. Make them toothier. So yeah, you can change the width of the peaks. Step quantizes them in steps, so if I go to less steps, we get very squarey things. Even with one step, just the peak. And you can mess with the pre-gain and stuff to change the kind of step heights and stuff. It's a pretty fun one to mess with too. They're all fun in different situations. All right, so that's these. And edge is the edge mode. This is the only one that actually affects the simulation mostly. So this is the wraparound mode that we're in. So let me just do one particle. This is the one we've been seeing a lot. It's just wrapping around. And this is how the simulation usually runs. Just wraps around. In this one, this reflects it at the edges. Okay, so something about reflect. This one's the cleanest mode. These ones get crazy. So at the reflect one, if we go really slowly, it won't introduce artifacts much. So if we go slow, it does a pretty clean reflection. But if we go faster, it explodes. And the only reason we don't see that is because we're in normalized mode. If we go in clip mode, they just explode. Which is kind of cool too. Or if I go to fold, noise. But in normalized mode, it normalizes the high values, so we keep seeing them, but they just get crazy. And depending on the speed you're at, it'll change that. How I describe it is a very like fuzzy metal sound. And I've used it for some metallic sounds like hi-hats and other things in my presets. And yeah, if you modulated the speed, you'd get different kind of metallic timbres. It's pretty cool. So that's definitely just like an art, using the artifacts to make cool sound design. And then here, the last one is a scroll mode, so it just dampens at the edges. Sorry, I'm in normalized mode. There's a little residue, so it got normalized. So yeah, in this edge, and if you go faster, of course, there's more artifacts made. And again, to show you, if we're in normalized mode, those really low values get really high. So you can actually use that to get cool harmonic series. But in a non-normalized mode, they just disappear. Sorry. And that could be cool with the auto reinit too. Just another way to dampen them, but off to the side. Okay, now below this is a fade window. So if I add a lot of energy, we could probably see it better. Let's increase it. So with no fade, you'll hear little kind of crackles as it goes across. Now, if there's a lot of harmonics, you won't even hear them, so you don't even need a fade. But with less harmonics, you'll hear it more clearly. Well, I guess we can't right now. Oh, so yeah, you could kind of hear it there. So it's good to have a little fade on a lot of times, but it will introduce its own harmonics and fundamental, as you can hear. And if you make it higher, that fundamental will get stronger. Especially in certain other modes and stuff that don't really have. I don't know how to show it briefly. Maybe with a lot of noise. Yeah, I don't know how to show it. But sometimes if you add more fade, it'll superimpose a fundamental more because it adds like a wave shape to it. Anyway, you can play around with it to get different tones. Less harmonic, more rounded. You can kind of see it fading at the edges, only up to 20%. This one doesn't affect the simulation. Now, like I said before, if you're doing like a pure sine tone in real value modes, this fade will add a little buzziness, so you'll want to turn it off or something like that if you want a pure sine. Okay. Flip at the edges, it will flip the value, it will swap the real value for the imaginary value. And this does different stuff. It adds kind of noisiness. Again, this is good with normalized mode on. Yeah, but it kind of depends on the settings. For example, if you had speed low, flip's going to cause the edges to explode. And if you have normalize on, you'll see what happens. It just goes blank because the edges go up really high. Usually you can kind of see it. Oh, here it comes. Yeah. Oh, I think it's because we're fading the edges. So if I didn't fade them, you can see the edges go really high. And at higher speeds, that doesn't happen. So actually the speed may be higher is better here. It depends what you want. Because something cool that happens if you do a low speed and the edges explode, actually everything's exploding. You just don't see it with the normalize on. And this is like just a weird artifact thing, but if we go to clip mode for this, it does that. But if we're here, you get this crazy square progression. So yeah, it makes everything explode, but you can use that to make cool sounds with. So flip, again, doesn't explode if you're above like 20%. Just adds noisiness and stuff. It really depends. So just mess around with it. Depends on this mode. All these things depend on each other. All right, noisy. This just makes everything a little noisy at the edges when they pass. Let's go back to normalize mode. So yeah, it's just adding some noise when it's hitting the edge. And it makes these things a little different too, like scroll get a little noisier. Yeah, see the scroll works a little different now. It kind of reflects noise back into it. So yeah, noisy just changes things up. All right. And then, so if you press reset, are you sure? Yes. It will reset all these values. If you press copy to, are you sure? Yes. It will copy all these values to the other voice. Okay. The rest of the parameters are easy to describe. Transposing, fine tuning, filter A and B. So there's a filter A and B down here. You can send volume to A or B. They're in parallel. Panning, gain. This is the gain of each voice. Okay, now the filter down here, pretty standard, low pass, etc. Standard shapes. These shapes with the LDR, they're ladder filters, which can sound pretty nice. Yeah, and there's a resonant filter. Resonant bandpass. Yeah, and there's a peak, notch, ladder filter, etc. And an A and a B in parallel. Okay, you turn them on and off here. Cool. If they're off, they just pass the sound through with no filter. Okay, and then you have some distortion. Very basic distortion, don't expect too much. Here you can turn to monophonic mode. And then portamento you can add. So that's in mono. So yeah. And then here's the ADSR for the amp for both voices. All right. The last thing is modulation. Pretty self-explanatory. 2 LFOs, 2 envelopes. And then here you map them. Each modulator has 2 destinations with a bipolar amount. You could go in reverse with the bipolar. Yeah, if you wanted to have separate amp envelopes for each of these to do more sound design, you'll have to map the envelopes to the gains here. Yeah, and here's the list. These ones are for the first oscillator. These ones are for the second, and then you have the filter A and B options. You have 2 LFOs, 2 envelopes, 2 random spray values, MIDI sources, and MPE sources at the very bottom. And then the only thing that's different about these is that in the LFOs, this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 option down, this is Perlin noise. So you can do random organic noise with this. Everything below the Perlin noise is like special shapes. Let's do it with pitch because that's really, it's gonna sound weird. Here's another one. Yeah. That's cool. That's like, so you can also drag in your own LFOs here. So if you drag in a wave file or something, it will, you can use your own user LFO. You can drag in any sound file, but I would recommend just dragging in one that's an LFO shape. Otherwise, it'll just be really crazy. But you can try it out. And then the only other different thing is in the envelopes. Down here at the bottom, you can repeat the envelope. And if you go to the highest value, it's an infinite repetition, so just endlessly looping the envelope shape. And I think that's it. I'm sure this video is super long. Thanks for sitting with it and getting, or considering getting Entanglement. Remember, this is just a walkthrough. Didn't try to do anything cool with the sound. But you can get really insane sound design with this that is very hard or impossible to get with other synths, even other wavetable oscillators, given this transformative nature. I didn't even try to show you all, like, you know, all this stuff where you can blend these particles in crazy ways and in ways that you can't do with other synths or very easily. So definitely check it out if you can. Thanks again.